What's going to rule your life? Where are you going to find true peace? You have a choice. Either be ruled by the endless chase for money, which brings constant anxiety, or be ruled by God Almighty, who alone offers real, lasting peace. This isn't about rejecting wealth or success. God isn't against you earning, building your business, or prospering financially. Look at David, Solomon, Abraham. They were wealthy, yet their riches never defined them. God's concern isn't whether you have money. It's whether money has you. You can't serve both God and materialism. And that's what Jesus made clear when he spoke about mammon, money as a master, not a tool. God's creative power is astonishing. He instills in birds the instinct to find food without a bank account, financial plan, or worry about tomorrow. They fly into the world with no savings, no strategy, yet they are provided for. Next time you feel anxiety creeping in, go to a park, watch the birds, and reflect. If God cares for them, why wouldn't he care for you? When we speak of peace, we're not talking about surface calm or temporary relief. True peace is an inner reality, a deep-rooted assurance anchored in spiritual truths that steady the soul through any storm. Whether it's bad news from a doctor, the loss of a job, or chaos in life circumstances. This peace doesn't crumble when life does. It's the kind of calm that remains intact even when everything seems to fall apart. It's anchored in something far greater than your daily struggles. True peace isn't the absence of challenges, frustrations, or conflict. It is a state of being, a gift from the Lord, born out of revelation and awareness of his care and provision. The most potent enemy of this peace isn't some external force, it's anxiety. Anxiety hits when life shifts unexpectedly, when circumstances escape your control, when the weight of perceived needs and obligations surfaces. And for many of us, this anxiety is most often tied to finances. Money worries dominate lives, creating stress over bills versus bills, future stability, debts, investments, and the endless calculations of, can I afford this or do I have enough saved? This fixation robs people of joy and gratitude for life's simple blessings, food, relationships, and everyday comforts. Anxiety tears the mind apart, dividing thoughts and inflicting emotional and mental damage. This isn't a condemnation of wealth or ambition. Building a business, saving, and investing are not sins. The issue arises when your financial concerns become the ruling priority in your heart, especially for those who claim to follow Jesus. God never intended for his followers to live under financial stress and worry. Your first allegiance must be to him, not your bank account. Either God rules your heart, bringing peace, or your love for money rules, bringing anxiety. Money, when treated like a master, becomes godlike. It commands attention, influences decisions, and can corrupt intentions. Jesus didn't frame the spiritual battle as a war between God and Satan over your soul in the literal sense. Rather, the real struggle is between God's provision and the human obsession with materialism. Your wrestling isn't over dark rituals or evil forces, it's over choices to support God's kingdom or hoard wealth for yourself. This battle shows up in everyday life. You might be thinking about bills, debts, sending kids to school, or maintaining your lifestyle, and that's where the real struggle lies. Inadvertently, money becomes the master of your heart, not because you intend it, but because circumstances and human nature allow it. The Lord calls worry a sin, something to actively resist, not to nurture like a pet. Treating anxiety as a spiritual violation rather than an accepted companion opens the door to peace. Declare it. I refuse to worry. By confronting worry head-on, you create space for divine peace to replace anxiety in your heart. Imagine facing frightening health news and still finding peace. Even when confronted with potentially life-threatening situations, you can refuse to give in to worry. That decision alone invites peace anchored not in circumstance, but in trust and spiritual authority. Life's value and calling far outweigh material concerns. Trust in God's care as He provides for the birds of the air, reorients your perspective. If He watches over creatures with no prayer, no relationship, no understanding, how much more will He care for you, created in His image and bearing eternal value? Next time anxiety threatens, remember, worrying does nothing. It doesn't add hours to your life. It only steals today's hope. If God can watch over every sparrow in the sky, every eagle soaring, every raven gliding across the wind, don't you think He's more than capable of taking care of you? Birds can't pray, they can't read, they can't worship, yet God provides for them. You, on the other hand, are made in His image, gifted with understanding, faith, and purpose. If He feeds creatures with no relationship with Him, how much more will He provide for someone He loves, someone who seeks Him, someone who trusts in His care? Anxiety over material needs becomes almost ridiculous when you step back and see the scale of the one who rules everything. It steals today's joy, it tears the mind, and it empties you of hope. It's a thief of peace, and the only way to reclaim your soul is to remember who's really in control. Let's talk about the absurdity of worry for a moment. Consider the lawns you drive past every day. God waters them, feeds them, makes them grow, and yet we fret over finances and possessions far more critical to our lives. How much more valuable are you than the grass beneath your feet or the birds in the trees? The creator of all things, the owner of the universe, the one who controls the winds and the rain, is saying, if I care for the smallest parts of creation, I will surely care for you. Every handshake, every meeting, every open door could be the instrument He uses to provide for your needs. Anxiety then becomes not just unnecessary, it becomes a form of spiritual blindness. You see, the moment you understand God's capacity to provide, worry starts to lose its grip. This doesn't mean you ignore your responsibilities or pretend life's challenges don't exist. It means you place your trust correctly. You act with diligence, yes, but without obsession. Pursue goals, make plans, and invest wisely, yet your heart isn't enslaved by fear of lack. True peace comes when you refuse to let money, circumstances, or societal pressures dictate your inner calm. You refuse to let anxiety define your value, your decisions, or your joy. It's a conscious choice, a spiritual declaration. I will not worry. I will not let my heart be mastered by fear or greed. And when you make that declaration, something shifts. The invisible weight lifts, clarity emerges, and you can move forward with confidence. The battle isn't just external, it's deeply internal. Anxiety thrives on perception, on the imagined scarcity of resources, on the illusion that control belongs to you. Perfectionists, high achievers, anyone who feels the world should bend to their plans. Listen closely. The moment things slip beyond your control, worry sneaks in. You start to feel powerless, as if your world depends entirely on your hands. But this is exactly the trap. When you surrender your control to God, when you let Him reign over your heart, you discover freedom. You discover that life's unpredictability doesn't have to shatter your peace. The rocks in the storm don't move, but your soul can remain steadfast. Even in the face of financial uncertainty, the principle holds. Your 401, your savings, your investments, they are not your master. God can work miracles through these tools, but He alone determines their ultimate outcome. The obsession with monitoring, calculating, and hoarding resources is a distraction from what really matters, living faithfully, generously, and with trust in His provision. Keeps us small-minded, focused on what we lack, while faith expands our perspective to see all that we already have. Gratitude becomes impossible under the weight of constant fear, yet gratitude is the soil where peace grows. Without it, anxiety consumes everything, leaving the mind torn, the spirit heavy, and the heart restless. So what's the practical takeaway? First, recognize the battle for your heart. Identify what rules you, God or money. Second, confront worry as a sin, not a lifestyle. Treat it as something to resist, to call out, to refuse. Third, remind yourself daily of God's faithfulness, just as He provides for birds, lawns, and all creation. Visual reminders like watching birds or observing nature can help anchor your mind in truth. Fourth, shift your focus from what you lack to what you have and how you can use it to honor God. Each step you take away from fear and toward trust strengthens peace and diminishes the power of anxiety. When practiced consistently, this is transformative, not just for your most mental state, but for your entire life. God's argument is simple and yet profound. If He cares for creatures with no awareness or relationship with Him, imagine the depth of care He has for you. This is not theoretical. It's visible in nature, in everyday life, in the provision that shows up in unexpected ways. He owns everything, controls everything, and delights in your welfare. Your worries, your sleepless nights, your mental battles over bills, debts, or financial plans, they do nothing to alter His capability or His desire to provide. Peace isn't about removing problems. It's about realigning your trust, recalibrating your heart, and refusing to let anxiety dictate your life. The more you grasp this, the less power worry has over you, and the more fully you experience life in His presence. When you start seeing your life through God's perspective, worry begins to crumble. Anxiety no longer feels like an inevitable companion because you understand who holds the reins. You start to grasp that every need, every challenge, and every circumstance is already in His hands. The bills, the debts, the business uncertainties, they are real, yes, but they no longer dominate your heart. Creator who sustains the universe is more than capable of providing what you need when you need it. This understanding transforms the way you live each day. You move from a mindset of fear to one of trust, from scarcity to abundance, from tension to peace. Peace is not a passive state. It's a deliberate choice. It requires rejecting worry as a master and embracing God as the ruler of your heart. This isn't a one-time decision, but a continuous act of faith. Each day presents new opportunities to affirm, I refuse to let anxiety rule me. I will trust God's provision. By doing this, you build spiritual resilience, a foundation that no circumstance can shake. Life may throw curveballs, yet your soul remains steady, grounded in something eternal. You find joy not in the absence of problems, but in the assurance that nothing, no setback, no financial strain, no uncertainty can undo the peace God gives. Consider the love of money, which Jesus warned about as a godlike force. It commands loyalty, captivates attention, and can even corrupt intentions when left unchecked. Money has the power to distract, to enslave, and to turn hearts away from God's purposes. The struggle is not between good and evil in some abstract cinematic sense. It's often a quiet daily tension between God's kingdom and our material desires. Every decision about how to spend, save, or invest can either strengthen your faith or feed the love of money. That's the reality many believers face, not a battle with demons, but a battle with priorities. It's the tension between giving generously to the kingdom or hoarding everything for personal security. Even when your intentions are pure, worry can take root. You might not mean for money to rule your heart, but pressures, bills, and responsibilities have a way of creating unconscious loyalty to wealth. The Lord calls this anxiety a sin, not in the sense of moral failure, but as a spiritual obstacle to peace. Treat it like a sin, actively resist it, refuse to feed it or nurture it like a pet, declare boldly, I will not worry. I will not let material concerns govern my heart. With that decision, peace floods in, replacing the tension that once dominated your mind and emotions. You start living with clarity, confidence, and the freedom to focus on what truly matters. Faith is also practical. It doesn't remove the need to plan, save, or work diligently. It simply places your trust in God's ultimate control over outcomes. You can be wise with your finances, make smart decisions, and yet remain unshaken, knowing that provision comes from Him. Anxiety no longer drives your actions because your foundation is secure. You are free to pursue your calling, live generously, and embrace life fully. Step of faith reinforces this peace, making it a habit, a lifestyle, and eventually a defining characteristic of your spiritual walk. The more you choose God over worry, the stronger this peace becomes, and the more resilient your heart grows. This principle also teaches perspective. By observing creation, you see the evidence of God's care everywhere. Birds without a bank account, grass that grows without attention, creatures provided for without effort, all signs that the Creator is intimately involved in sustaining life. If He cares for them, how much more will He care for you, made in His image, capable of prayer, and positioned to experience His blessings? Understanding this helps diminish the power of anxiety. You start seeing worries as temporary illusions, incapable of changing God's faithfulness. Each time you focus on His provision, you train your heart to respond with trust instead of fear, faith instead of doubt. Ultimately, this teaching is a call to action. Stop letting material concerns dominate your thinking. Stop allowing anxiety to define your days. Refocus on God's provision, His care, and His plans for your life. Actively choose peace, refuse worry, and embrace the assurance that comes from a heart fully surrendered to God. Life's uncertainties will always exist, but your response can be transformed. By prioritizing God over materialism, you unlock a freedom and tranquility that money alone can never provide. Peace becomes a shield, a stabilizing force, and a daily reminder of who truly rules your life. Challenge is real, but the solution is straightforward. Align your heart with God, not with the pursuit of wealth. Every time worry creeps in, remind yourself that God owns everything and orchestrates every detail. Your focus shifts from panic over resources to faith in His ability to provide. You act with responsibility, yes, but without anxiety, because your trust is in the one who is far bigger than any financial circumstance. Peace isn't a passive state. It's a daily conscious decision to reject worry and embrace faith. Each choice to trust God over money strengthens your heart and expands your capacity to experience joy. Anxiety often disguises itself as practicality, making us feel like we are preparing, planning, and controlling outcomes. Often, it's just fear wearing a mask, convincing us that worry equals wisdom. The truth is, worry achieves nothing. It never changes God's ability to provide. It doesn't increase your savings or improve your business. Instead, it drains your energy, divides your mind, and prevents you from fully living in the present. When you start to see worry for what it is, an unnecessary burden, you begin to treat it as a spiritual problem to confront, not a companion to tolerate. That shift alone can release enormous peace into your life. The birds of the air, and the grass under your feet are constant reminders of God's care. They exist without concern, without labor for tomorrow, yet they are provided for. If God sustains creatures with no consciousness of Him, how much more will He provide for you, His beloved creation? You have awareness, faith, and access to prayer, yet anxiety often overshadows your trust. This perspective is transformative. It changes how you approach daily life, decisions, and responsibilities. You can plan and prepare, but your peace doesn't hinge on your ability to control outcomes. It rests on God's providence. Worry can also blind you to life's blessings. When your mind is dominated by financial stress, you overlook the everyday gifts that are already yours. Relationships, opportunities, health, and the simple joys that surround you. Anxiety narrows your focus, making you believe that provision is scarce and that God's favor is delayed or withheld. Yet His faithfulness is visible everywhere, if only you look. Recognizing this requires intention. You have to actively choose to see provision instead of lack. You have to intentionally align your perspective with God's promises rather than your fears. Finally, the key to living in peace is repeated practice. Every day you face choices about where your heart and attention go. You choose whether worry or faith will dominate your thinking. You declare, I refuse to let anxiety rule me. I will trust God's provision and walk in peace. This is not naive optimism. It's a deliberate, spiritually rooted decision to reject worry as a master and embrace God's care as ultimate. Over time, this discipline transforms your mind, shapes your emotions, and steadies your soul. Peace becomes your default response, not your exception. It doesn't eliminate challenges, but it equips you to navigate them without fear. Once you fully internalize this principle, peace becomes the default, not the exception. You stop measuring your worth by your account balance or your possessions and start measuring it by the faithfulness of God who holds your future. Every decision, every challenge, every unexpected twist in life becomes an opportunity to exercise trust rather than surrender to fear. Even when bills pile up, when opportunities feel scarce, or when setbacks arise, the foundation of your confidence remains unshakable. The choice is yours. Will you allow the pursuit of money to dominate your mind, or will you let God's provision govern your heart? The difference is profound. One leads to endless anxiety, the other to deep, abiding peace. The love of money, when it comes godlike in your life, demands attention, loyalty, and often compromises your values without you even realizing it. Jesus highlighted this struggle as the real wrestling match many of us face. The tug of war between supporting God's kingdom and clinging to personal wealth. Most believers aren't grappling with dark forces or evil rituals. Their battles are with priorities, how to balance giving and holding, generosity and security. When financial concerns dominate, anxiety inevitably follows. The solution is simple but not easy. Consciously submit your resources, your decisions, and your heart to God, knowing He is the ultimate provider. Peace is born in that surrender. Practical application requires action, not just belief. Start treating worry like a sin, a spiritual disruption that must be confronted, resisted, and replaced with faith. Don't nurture it, don't feed it, don't pet it like a harmless companion. Declare, I refuse to worry. I will trust in God's provision. This declaration is transformative. In moments of uncertainty, sickness, potential loss, peace can anchor you. Choosing trust over anxiety doesn't ignore reality. It reorients your perspective, giving you the ability to act wisely without being ruled by fear. Decision repeated daily reshapes your mind, strengthens your emotions, and steadies your soul. Nature provides constant evidence of God's care. Birds soar without strategy, yet they are fed. Grass grows without intervention, yet it flourishes. Animals survive without prayer, faith, or devotion, yet God provides. If the Creator sustains them, how much more will He sustain you, made in His image, gifted with awareness, faith, and potential? Anxiety loses its power when you internalize this truth. You begin to see provision everywhere, from the smallest details to life-altering opportunities. Each time you choose trust, peace expands and worry shrinks. Life becomes less about survival and more about abundant living in harmony with God's design. Finally, living in peace requires repetition and discipline. Every day, you face decisions that reveal who rules your heart, God or materialism. Each choice to trust over worry builds spiritual muscle, reinforcing a pattern of faithfulness. Your mindset shifts from scarcity to abundance, from tension to calm, from fear to freedom. Peace isn't automatic. It's cultivated through consistent practice, deliberate trust, and a refusal to let money dominate your thoughts. By embracing this approach, you unlock not only emotional relief, but also a deeper relationship with God, a life of purpose, and the ability to navigate challenges with clarity. Worry accomplishes nothing. Peace rooted in God accomplishes everything.